Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Don't Praise the Machine. It's time for everybody's favorite recurring segment on the show. Boy, that's a large language model. And John, John, you've been playing around with the news and you've been playing around with a large language model, and you've discovered something that's made you jump right out of your bed in the middle of the night with your nightcap and candle and scream, boy, that's a large language model.
And shake Jacinta awake. Oh my God, it's a large language model, I screamed. Yeah, I was doing my honk shoes with my nightcap and gym jams. And then I sat up in my bed. And the reason I did that is because I had diarrhea. Now, that's an odd segue, isn't it? But it's true. I was on a recent holiday.
That's great.
I was on a holiday with Jacinta. I think I might have mentioned this last week. It's a bit of because we're having a baby in January, we wanted to get away for a little restful baby moon. And my body does this thing where when I let it relax from work stress, it just goes, okay, I'll just let my guard down. My immune system shuts down and I just get quite sick. And she shuts down. I must have gotten food poisoning from something. So the first day and then the last day of the trip, I was quite unwell. But it was fine, really. It was very fleeting. It was nothing serious, but it did make me use ChatGPT for kind of serious diagnostic purposes in a way that I previously hadn't. And the reason I was reflecting on that more recently was because I got back from this holiday and then I read this very apposite study or a report of a study that had recently been published. What happened was they tried to conducted an experiment to see whether doctors could be compared to ChatGPT in terms of the accuracy of their diagnostic skills. So there's a 100 or so in America of these kind of complicated fact scenarios based on real patients that will do the rounds at different medical schools, and they're kind of selected because they're a bit more challenging and complicated. And they don't generally get published because they want to keep them fresh for med students, etc. But they made the decision to publish one of them with this study because the results of the study were quite striking. Basically, the doctors scored substantially lower than ChatGPT. So and what made it particularly interesting was that there was a cohort of doctors who had access to ChatGPT, but even they scored significantly lower than just ChatGPT on its own. Or it might have been a kind of slightly bespoke version, but essentially it was a large language model, right? But the same technology as ChatGPT. So the doctors that were randomly assigned to use the chatbot got an average score of 76% on these diagnostic experiments. Randomly assigned not to use it had an average score of 74%, so slightly lower than if they had access to large language chatbot. And the chatbot on its own scored an average of 90%, so really good, substantially higher level of accuracy. And so they were kind of, you just would put this person's story in. Basically, it's fairly involved, but it's like an older guy, pain in his lower back.
Like patient history.
Yeah, pain in his low back, pain in his butt, pain in his calves. He'd been treated with a angioplasty to widen a coronary artery, blah, blah, blah. And you had to say, well, what's my best guess as to the three things that he is likely to, like top three guesses. And what do I think is my favorite of those? And so the chatbot did really well. And what made it particularly interesting was, as I say, the fact that even aided by that technology, the doctors still did very poorly compared to just asking the chatbot and taking its responses rather than kind of, mediating them with what the doctor thought. And the reason for that, they think, is because doctors often have fairly strong, preconceived ideas about what's likely. And so they might sort of put the patient history or some of it into the chatbot. Chatbot might say, I think it's probably this. And the doctor goes, that doesn't sound right, and basically sticks with what they thought anyway. So there's only a very slight increase in accuracy if they use it or if they don't. Whereas burdened by human bias, the chatbot does really well. And what also made it interesting is it went into this, the article I read about it, which was in the New York Times, went into this history of various attempts to, going back, to the 90s and even earlier, to basically automate diagnostic processes. So getting like machines to learn a bunch of inputs, you kind of plug in, kind of like a WebMD type thing. You plug in a bunch of symptoms, then you say, well, this person has these symptoms, and it gives you an output. And they were always pretty shit. And doctors never had any confidence in them. They were never very reliable. They were okay for some things, but like none of these things really succeeded. And they were based on, I guess, this kind of attempt to mimic the way that humans think they make decisions. Whereas what's weird about the chatbot is it's not like it has specifically been trained on medical data. It's not like it has any kind of medical expertise. It's just using language patterns, and yet it's managing to do this job extremely well, better than software that was specifically designed to try and automate this function. So that's kind of surprising. And then I thought, well, how does that connect to my experience? And one of the things because what happened was I actually ended up having a telehealth appointment with a real human doctor, and I was struck by how much less useful that was than what I'd had with ChatGPT, and also how it just added nothing. And I paid, $80 for it or whatever it is, and maybe get a bit back. But basically I had this, sudden onset of illness on holiday. So then I said to ChatGPT, look, this is what's happened. And I went into the kind of detail that I probably wouldn't with the doctor, where talking
about your movements,
about my movements,
or lack thereof.
Yeah, exactly. And I also asked it a bunch of kind of quite direct follow-up questions, which I probably would be reluctant to do with a doctor, because I don't know, doctors don't always have great people skills. You don't want to insult their intelligence. Yeah, all of that. So
you might have also want to add something like, also ChatGPT, I don't know if this is important, I am addicted to meth.
Exactly.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Is my bowel movements because I'm an ice freak?
Yeah. Is it because I'm an ice freak?
Maybe you don't want your doctor to know.
I was doing some like freaky butt stuff in bed last night. Is that?
Yeah,
is that
of
maybe?
Course. Is it just that?
Is that? Could that?
I was putting ice up my butt.
I was putting ice up there. So I said, these were my symptoms. This is what happened in very explicit terms. This is what it looked like. And then I was like, is it possible that it's due to this? And why do you say that? And, what's the basis for your view? And do you think that if I took gastrostop or some other kind of suppressing medication that it would do more harm than good? And like, here's exactly what I ate. And also things like, here is, okay, so now it's the next day. I'm still feeling pretty bad, and I'm wondering if I have an alcohol-free, like a Nort or a Guinness, is that going to potentially aggravate it, or is that fine? And the thing that ChatGPT can immediately do, which a doctor couldn't, is just go, well, I've got immediate access in my model to all of the ingredients in that, and basically you can look immediately at like all these resources about, well, it's got these vitamins which might actually be good, but it's got these things which, there's some evidence that they might aggravate it, and here's this bacteria that it might be affecting or whatever, and blah blah blah. So it's just kind of obviously better. And then I had this sort of crap, sort of old, very average doctor who was like, dunno, maybe you could take antibiotics, but it's a bit early, so just have gastrostop. And I was like, why did I fucking pay for this? Like, it's such a
And then
rort.
he went, give me money.
Yeah,
Give money now.
exactly.
$80.
That's right. And I said, well,
And you were just there.
I haven't even told you about the color and consistency of my movement yet. If you want to earn the money, ChatGPT had to find that out for free. I want to tell you about the
you must just
sound
be
it
sitting
made.
there.
And he said, that's not relevant.
I've just saying, can you send me your WhatsApp number? I'm going to send you audio clip
Yeah, I'm
from
going to send you
sound.
a couple of WAV files called brap.wav.
Parp. I've got Parp. I'm looking for Parp 2. I've got Parp2.wav and frap.mp3. Frap 6. Oh, the sixth one was I think
Exactly.
the sixth one was the truest to the character of my experience.
Yeah.
I've got frap6.mp3
I had
and Parp2.wav.
I worked out.
I chose 2 different audio compression formats.
Exactly. This one I've managed to isolate some. I've tried to remove some of the noise from the bathroom fan so you can get
I've added a slight delay to this one because I just liked the kind of spatial characteristic. I've been listening to a lot of U2 and Edge's guitar. I was paying a lot of attention to, so I thought I'd just run it through a lot of reverb and delay. Does that help, Doc?
Does that help you get it?
Well, imagine, John, if the other thing is you're doing all this without the large language model. Boy, John, let me first just say, boy, at the end of your story, just let me first say, boy, that's a large language model, which we do at the end of every anecdote about a large language model.
And I turned around and I said to the guy.
I was on my computer. It gave me the answer. I put my arm on the desk. I turned around to my partner, Jacinta. I said, Jacinta, boy, that's a large, pointing back at the computer. Boy, that's a large language model.
Exactly. She said,
but it's doing.
Put some pants on and crack a window, would you?
It's doing all of that now without your medical history.
Yeah.
It will have, the next step will be, it will know everything about you since you were baby boy.
Yeah.
It will take all of your documents and it will feed into it. And in much the same way that people have said that Uber came in and made their, Uber took like cab drivers where it was a single trip and you didn't have to necessarily be friendly or provide a certain service because you just got in the cab and you'd never see them again and off they go. And then suddenly Uber said, well, now we're going to give drivers like ratings and we're going to give passengers ratings. And then, people have commented on my experience with Uber is like better now because they give me like, they're generally friendlier than I remember cabs being because that's now a thing that is like, and I think similarly, like you said, people have had experiences with doctors that, obviously, there's loads of doctors that are amazing and do a great job, but there's also doctors who are just not particularly friendly.
Yeah.
I've got some childhood trauma from doctors who I remember cutting my finger once, cutting onions, and just went into a doctor and he was just like, yeah, whatever's just like put it in this antiseptic and just went, and he was just very cold. And I have several memories actually of like cold.
God, me too. Just
doctors.
Like almost saddened. They almost delighted. Yeah.
But like it's going to take that element out of the, as well as all the other things it's going to do. You don't have to worry about having a kind of a doctor who you might feel is like a little bit disinterested or whatever,
or fatigued,
and it's going to have. Or fatigued, fatigued. And, like they always say that thing about judges are more likely to give you a lenient sentence if you get them on, is it like the end of the week or the start of the week?
They're more lenient after
lunch.
And I was in court yesterday.
And they say because they've had and they say that it's because judges tend to have a wank at lunch. Is that
exactly. We had a,
Judges will wank at lunch.
they call it a comfort break in legal circles. Everyone goes off to the comfort closets that are supplied at the court.
By the courts. But the other thing you were saying, of course, is that the thing that's happening now, I've mentioned it about speaking German to ChatGPT.
Yeah.
What's happening with the large language models is that we don't feel the same level of self-consciousness that we do with a human. We don't feel like we're being judged.
Yeah.
So now we're having these interactions where we feel more free to, like, I'm much more comfortable to just go, I'm just going to speak to ChatGPT for an hour in German than I would be to go out on the street and do it. And obviously the idea is that then I would go out on the street and be more confident and perform better because I've been through a kind of, in the same way that you do like a flight simulator or something like that,
Exactly. And you go,
the stakes are much lower.
Yeah, that's right. Because you go, well, there's nothing, like if you say to it, look, I know you've tried to explain this to me, but I'm just not getting it. And then it tries to explain it again. You go, look, that's still not helping. You just wouldn't do that with a person because eventually you'd just be like, this is too awkward now. I have to just leave it. And,
that's just giving me memories of maths class.
Yeah, exactly. Totally. And, there's also, people have a particular method of teaching. And I'm sure that ChatGPT has certain ways of expressing itself that have their limitations, but it probably also has access to a variety of different kind of patterns of teaching a concept or conveying a concept, so that if you say to it, that's not getting through to me, it says, well, all right, think about it in these terms or whatever. Or you can tell it.
Because we know that you
I'm
need
this
pictures.
kind of learner. Can you give me an example in this way?
And it will. And after it will very soon know what type of learner you are better than you know what type of learner. You'll speak to it. You'll speak to it and it will go, okay, I've been able to ascertain that you're this type of learner.
Yeah.
I mean, I was having this conversation with my friend Claire yesterday. It's going to revolutionize teaching in a way that I think is going to be incredibly beneficial. And it's going to make, like you and I were lucky enough to go to a very good school, but that school was expensive and a lot of kids just don't have access to that. We got teachers who are much more attentive than you might get at a school that doesn't have the same kind of resources that our school had.
Yeah.
But what's about to happen is that like everybody's going to get more or less the same kind of education. So a kid who comes from a very poor background is still going to have access to this incredibly cheap, personalized, tailored technology. And the other thing with education is that this idea of going to a place at 9 a.m. and staying there until 3:30 and sitting in a room with 30 other people while one teacher at the front gives you a kind of essentially like a rote lesson, and then some kids really absorb it, some kids kind of absorb it, and some kids absolutely don't, but you all just have to keep turning up every day and going to this thing. We will look back on that in 10 years, and kids who have just been taught directly by computers will just be like, that's mental. Like you just spent how many years of your early childhood doing that? Because the other thing that will happen is that instead of it being 9 till 3:30, they will work out, actually the amount that we were learning between 9 and 3:30 in the traditional education system, we can actually get that out of people in about 2 hours with us. So you'll just like your kids will do like 2 hours of tailored AI education, and then they're free to go and socialize because you don't want them in front of like a computer teacher their entire life. So it's like, cool, get you like tailored 2 hours in the morning. So you're just absorbing it all, and then go and play with the kids for like a little bit, and then you can do something else. Go and do some community service or something like.
As long as you're not in the house, I don't care. Just you're bugging me. Yeah, I mean it's true. You can imagine them, and you can imagine that being complemented by the kinds of things that, of course, not just large language models, but the internet has allowed. Like, more tailored, small scale learning through people's individual classes, people's, sort of subscriber based services, etc. And I mean, that's kind of challenging traditional higher education models, because you could say, well, I just want to go and learn from this guy, join this guy's class, and I'll get sort of one-on-one consultations with him, and then there'll be there'll be kind of recorded classes, and there'll be Q&As, and there'll be materials that he gives me, and I just pay, instead of paying $50,000 for a degree, I just pay him $1,000 or something, and off I go. And so that's concerning for me, because I'm not great, and I'm currently on the Melbourne Law School staff. So for teachers of my ilk, it's a worrying time. But
that's why tell them all that. That's why you need a podcast.
That's what exactly. That's what
this
is my
people are going to be craving the real.
Yeah,
they want to hear something. They want to hear a couple of guys that use like, kind of, and sort of way
that's right.
too much.
That's how you know it's real.
Because they want to be caught up in the real, just like Counting Crows' Mr. Jones song, what goes, caught up in the real, girl, show me some of that Spanish dancing. I think it says caught up in the real. That's what I always assumed it says.
Yeah.
Caught up in the real, show me some of that Spanish dancing. Wanna just pass me a bottle, Mr. Jones.
Just on Uber as well, I noticed during the week that, and I don't know if this is a new thing or if it's just something that I only just noticed, but it has this facility for drivers to put in a bit of kind of personal getting to know you information about themselves.
It's turned into Tinder and Hinge.
Yeah,
Uber's added
it has
so you can choose. Yeah,
added Hinge functionality.
And what have you had?
Well, what
have you had?
So what happened was
hobbies have you had?
What happened was I had this quite long journey because I had to go into my office, but I had to pick up a card that had fallen out of my pocket at a restaurant the previous day. So I went, okay, this is a double. I've got 2 stops with this guy. Started off talking to him about, how do you make, what's your day look like? And we got into sort of the economics of being an Uber driver and how he kind of tries to be in certain places during the peak hours, and then maybe he'll do an airport trip and how much you can make out of it. And then that evolved into him saying, well, I make about this much, but I figure, I have autonomy and it's not very stressful, and, I get to write off my car as an expense and blah, blah, blah. And then we got into how people are kind of too caught up in pursuing status and prestige, and how even very rich people tend to work very hard these days. And then we got into it just spiraled. It was one of the best Uber conversations I've ever had in my life. So from there we talked about how people are too kind of driven by anxiety rather than by moving towards things that excite them, and how capitalism really, really pushes us to move in that direction, and how eventually he just was talking to me about his view of the purpose of existence and the soul and the meaning of life and all this shit. So I got out and I felt like I'd been on a fucking 2-week retreat. It was so intense. And I was just like, that guy changed my whole perspective on shit. And then, and he seemed kind of unusually wise and insightful, and it seemed like somebody who had basically chosen Uber driving because, he wasn't interested in the rat race and whatever. And so I looked up his profile, and that was the first time I discovered that they had this thing which he'd made full use of, where he said, when I'm not driving, I like to talk about, and I'm interested in physics and evolutionary psychology and all this kind of crazy shit, which made total sense given the conversation that we'd had. And, I trade on the stock market and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, well, that's all well and good, because this guy's probably a cult leader and he's trying to get new followers like me. And, but why does Uber have this facility? I don't know why I should want to know about or they should want to tell me about their personal life. It's strange, but I guess, I don't know.
So
maybe
I guess it's meant to be that.
Maybe it's like people feel
it's when you get in.
Sorry?
It must be for when it must be there so that when you get in the ride, you can quickly look at it and go, oh, I see you're into
I guess that's right.
this. So I'll talk to you about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Which what's your? Oh, it says here your favorite animal is a toad. What? Tell me about that.
Let's dive deep into that. Let's get real toady on the way to my office.
Let's change gears. Yeah, I brought this.
Switch gears.
I brought this toad to show you because I thought you'd like it.
So, as I was preparing for my Uber, I saw I had 2 minutes, and it just so happens that I keep a bucket of toads in my garden, and so I've brought you a toad in a box because I saw that.
Exactly.
And then you get 5 stars, John.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that guy got 5 stars.
What is your rating?
It's pretty good. I think it's about
rating is
4.83 or something. So it's okay.
Where do you think you lost them?
I take a lot of Ubers, so I think that they just get a more, like, I think it's easier to project your best self if you're only taking Ubers occasionally. But if you take them a lot, naturally your rating reflects a broader spectrum of your personality. So I'll get, I'll have some where I'm just cranky and I'm like, can you turn the radio off? Why does it smell like cabbage in this Uber? That sort of stuff. And that maybe drop my rating. Or there's actually probably a few where I've just been pissed and like fell asleep in the back and snored or something. And they've gone, this guy. But 4.83 is okay. I was talking to someone about it, how, in the early days, they really obviously wanted to distinguish themselves from cabs more, and the drivers would do things to try and gain an advantage, like, offering you treats and
Mentos chewing gum.
Yeah, they'd give you a breath mint and, maybe like one of those little bowls to dip your hands in to wash them, and I don't know, some
Is that true?
No, that never happened. And a hot towel and some aftershave.
Yeah, one of those little Turkish head massage.
Yeah, that's right.
Internet ASMR Turkish head massage.
But now that doesn't really happen, and I think it's because I've been encouraging people to use the rating system more robustly, and I know that it's hard because you don't want to, just because someone's having a bad day, you don't want to endanger their employment. But the way we get good Uber drivers is to occasionally give them 4 stars or maybe even 3 stars.
Yeah, that's the only. And then they're going to get home and I haven't been letting my game slip.
Yeah,
and I really need to tighten things up.
Exactly. Maybe it does smell in the car. That's what everyone keeps saying.
Maybe I should stop. Maybe I should stop boiling my famous cabbage soup.
Exactly.
In my Ford Focus. John, I've got something what you're going to really sink your teeth into and go, wow, what a great topic that you've brought to the show today. And that is that I want to talk to you about something that we tend to talk about every year on the show, I think, when it comes around, and that is Oxford have just announced their word of the year.
Oh.
Have you seen this? Have you heard about this? Have you heard about Oxford 2024 word of the year?
Yeah, I certainly have. I'm just trying to, I think I remember now what it is, yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to bring up my notes here. So, Oxford has announced its word of the year. So they take a public vote, which I didn't realize. I'd like to be a part of that next time. Maybe you have to be in some sort of academy. It says more than 37,000 people voted to help choose the winner. This is from The Guardian, I think. From a short list of 6 words drawn up by Oxford University Press, the publisher of the Oxford Dictionary. And we should do the little Ryanair fanfare. The 2024 Oxford Dictionary word of the year is brain rot.
There you go.
Brain rot. Have you heard this? Can you think about this?
I think about it. I don't really know what it is. Perhaps you can be my
explain it to you.
And the audience ally.
This is also this is a classic Don't Praise the Machine moment where I explain to John a term that's hip with the kids, and we will look back on this in 2 years after John's using it in every second sentence.
Yeah.
And you'll go remember when I explained this to you, which happened, of course, with No Cap about 3 years ago. And So Oxford. So we have here the description that they gave it from. Again, this is from Guardian. Brain rot is defined as the supposed deterioration of a person's mental or intellectual state, especially viewed as the result of overconsumption of material, now particularly online content, considered to be trivial or unchallenging. So, John, have you ever looked up? Have you ever come? I mean, I keep meaning to do a bit of a show on this, but have you looked up Skibbity Toilet before? Skibbity Dom Dom Yes Yes.
Yeah, I have looked up Skibbity Toilet, and I was very impressed by what I found. Really helped believe in humanity.
Skibbity Toilet.
Yeah.
Yeah, Skibbity Toilet's pretty much year zero in that's a very great example of brain rot. And then it's basically like consuming really low quality content online, or you might also huge overconsumption of just really shitty memes,
just sort of because it's there and not because it's like actually genuinely compelling or constructive.
Totally. Mm-hmm. And you might think of those TikTok videos where there's a split screen between the thing that they're explaining to you and like a mobile game like Temple Run or Graffiti Runner. There's some or the oddly satisfying videos. There'll be a split screen so that your brain is stimulated by a video game whilst somebody explains something kind of boring to you. That's very brain rotty as well, because it's kind of playing into this zombified state of humans. Another one they talk about is the huge quantity of low quality children's content that is on YouTube. So you might even say, you know, we've done a show on kids content on YouTube, and that's very brain rotty. You know, like really the kind of shit that you're going to put in front of your kid, and that kid going to grow up real wrong if you just like letting it watch Ukraine. You're just like letting it watching for some reason. It's just, if you said you're at a barbecue with other parents and they said, oh, like, how do you keep your little one entertained? And you say, well, obviously I just allow them to watch Russian, Ukrainian families who live in Florida and are dressed in bright colors, throwing paint and eating candy. Exactly. That's the kind of thing that's going to make my little girl grow up to be president of the United States.
Yeah, that's right. Just high contrast images with sort of manic Ukrainian middle-aged people. Great.
An incredible amount of and a sound effect every 100 frames, a sound effect. Aruga, aruga.
And the kids just
it's like that Tim and Eric e-bumping video.
Exactly.
We're e-bumping.
That's right.
Yeah.
There you go. Brain rot.
So that's brain rot. So you might also see that you'll see the kids, you'll see the generation alphas, they'll be watching Skibbity Toilet saying, you know, Giat Riz Ohio. I don't even know what Ohio means yet. I haven't looked it up, but Riz. I got Ohio Riz Giat.
Yeah. I will have to do a deep dive into the Skibbity Toilet history at some stage, because
it's incredible.
Yeah, I did look it up at one point, probably only a couple of months ago, and learned about all of the kind of evolving. I mean, to call it a storyline is probably giving it too much credit, but it's this sort of very strange, you know, like there's a race of toilets with human heads, and they're against another race, and they've all got these like Titan, these kind of giant avatars that fight each other, and they're all like made of toilets. It's just like, what the fuck is this? And and it's supposed to be, isn't it, this kind of the first time that Generation Alpha perhaps are having an influence on popular culture, or have chosen a sort of, you know, thing that they want to identify,
like a language through which to.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
it's
There's
funny.
All these great videos on. They're gone.
Funny because when you mentioned Oxford Word of the Year, I looked it up on Wikipedia, and it goes back quite a ways. It goes back about 20 years, and some of the other ones. Yeah. Some of the similar, like there's, you know, the American Dialect Society that goes back to 1990. And it does give you this kind of snapshot to sort of what was going on at the time. So the ones that go back prior to the millennium, obviously they're looking at like, things that were happening with Clinton and then they're looking at stuff with Y2K, whatever. But the Oxford ones go back to 2004 with the UK word of the year for that year was chav. And it kind of makes it seems very sort of simpler time, kind of naive. So, for example, 2005, the US word of the year for the Oxford University Press was podcast. And it's kind of like, that's not, that's just obviously something that we don't even consider as a particularly notable term, or carbon neutral, or credit crunch, or selfie was 2013. I mean, that's like now just become very common.
Selfie's Australian.
Is it? There you go.
Yeah, I'm 99% sure that Australia, because if you think about it, we would be the type of person who would do a little shortening of, because I'm sure somebody said must have been like a self photograph.
Yeah.
And then who else is going to take that and go, that's too hard.
Yeah. Chuck a selfie, mate. Just give it the old selfie.
It could have quite as easily been selfo.
Yeah.
It could have quite as easily been like, exactly. Barry, fucking do a selfo. Do a selfo, you fucking cunt. Check my Facebook from last night. I was like fucking absolutely firing on all cylinders, and I took so many selfos.
I'm gonna start saying selfo. Have you got one of those selfo sticks? Oh, rack off, Gary! You took my selfo stick. The last 3 years have given a nice snapshot of the terminal decline that we're now in. So you've got 2022 goblin mode, 2023 Riz, and now brain rot.
Yeah. Yeah. What else what have we got? So I'm having a look as well, John. So it's interesting, 2009, the US word of the year was unfriend. So that's obviously driven by Facebook.
Yeah.
And what was going on back then. And then it's interesting seeing ones that just nobody uses anymore. Squeezed middle, 2011.
Yeah, I don't know what
Omni Shambles, 2012, I guess, had its moment and went away. 2013 selfie, 2014 vape, still very much a thing. 2016 post truth. So that's the first year that Trump is elected, and suddenly post truth. And then Youthquake, that didn't go anywhere.
How's that? Yeah, that was
Youthquake didn't go anywhere.
They backed the wrong horse that year, obviously. But who knows what next year will bring. I mean, you've got similarly.
Yeah, we must have.
Merriam-Webster.
We talked about Riz. We talked about Riz last year. It's always a fun time of the year. I think I do think brain rot is a great choice because it is used to describe. I mean, what else would it be an equivalent of? It expresses more than doom scrolling, for example.
Yeah.
Like that's the closest thing I think of is if I think of consuming a lot of zombified, you're in a zombified state, consuming a large quantity of low quality content. I think doom scroll. But brain rot is much more. Brain rot could apply to YouTube, for example, as well. You could watch if you watch a 13-minute Russian-Ukrainian Miami children's channel. That's not doom scrolling because you're sitting there and you're not scrolling. It's a much more all-encompassing low-quality internet meme
rather than a particular activity.
And skibbity,
it's true. I'm just looking at the Macquarie one, which is an Australian dictionary, and they went with enshittification this year, which is great. Last year was.
Have you heard that?
Oh, not really. Last year was Cosy Libs, which was the stupid Australian term for cost of living crisis. And
right.
And this one I do like, 2022, the People's Choice went to bachelor's handbag. Are you familiar with that expression?
No.
So
what is that?
In Australia, and I don't know, I guess this is not just an Australian thing, although perhaps it's more distinctive than I realized, but you can go to the supermarket, as you all know, and get in a sort of plastic, like a kind of hard plastic container that's essentially like a carry bag. You can get a whole roast chicken and they'll be sitting around a little warmer. You go to Woolworths or Coles, you pick up the plastic bag with the little handle on it, and it's got a roast chicken in it. So going and getting just like a takeaway roast chicken and going home and just eating it out of the bag, I guess, is a very bachelory activity. So it's known
Right.
as the bachelor's handbag. So there you go.
Yeah, right. I wouldn't have thought that was like a common enough
No.
site to
No.
warrant its own word of the year.
It's weird, but I don't know. We're not really known.
Do you want to say on me, John, about film that you got invited to see
Sure. So
today?
actually, while we've been talking, Jacinta just got back, so I haven't had a chance to quiz her yet, but she got back from seeing a film that we talked about a lot last week. The film, what is named Wicked, and it's an adaptation, of course, of the famous musical. And last week we talked a lot about the obnoxious press tour. Is it Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande?
Yeah, Ariana Grande.
Just kind of weeping and patronizing and self-aggrandizing nonsense. And so we ended with a call to action for our DPTMs, which was basically do not go and see Wicked. And
the pledge.
The
Wicked pledge. The anti-Wicked pledge.
Exactly. And we I think in the caption to the YouTube video of last week's episode, we had hashtag don't see Wicked. And so I felt that I needed to lead by example. So a few days ago, Jacinta said to me, look, what are you doing on Saturday? I said, nothing. And she said, well, I'm having lunch with some friends and then some friends of ours, including Harley and Sammy. I know Harley's a big DPTMer. They are coming along and we're going to see Wicked. Would you like to come? And I said, it's not a question of whether I would like to come or not. I've made a commitment to myself and to my fans that I can't go. So just count
to
me
my
out.
group
And
to my 12-step group.
Exactly.
I've made a commitment.
Yeah, that's right. And
I don't have to turn up. I don't have to turn up to the meeting on Tuesday night and say, "Oh, guys, I'm sorry. I'm back. I'm back to the start."
That's right.
I'll let myself down.
Yeah, I have to turn my days since I broke my Wicked pledge back to zero. But yeah, I'm pleased with myself, with my self-discipline and my sticking to my principles. And I also felt, I mean, even if I hadn't made that pledge, I just thought this sounds like the kind of thing where I'm going to go with a bunch of people who are much more open to enjoying that kind of experience than I am. And I'm going to wreck it for them. And that I'm not going to have a great time watching it, and they're going to have a worse time by virtue of my having attended. So let's just call the whole thing off, and I'll stay home and watch The Killer with Michael Fassbender, a David Fincher classic.
That's a much more excellent choice, John. The last thing I'm going to close the show with is I'm going to say on you that I came over here and everybody's talking about the Guinness shortage. Have you seen this? Have you heard about this? Have you seen this? Have you heard about this?
No.
So apparently Guinness has had a huge explosion in popularity because of social media over the last maybe year. I think Kim Kardashian, I don't know if they paid her, but she was doing something with a Guinness, and there's been a lot of kids on YouTube, on social media doing various like Guinness quality challenges where you tip the glass of Guinness at a certain angle, and if the foam touches your nose, it's good or bad. I don't know. So it's had this big explosion in popularity, and the group that distributes it, which is that huge alcohol conglomerate that I forget the name of, Diageo, I think it is. Let me have a look here.
Yeah,
just having a look here at Guardian. Yeah, Diageo. So they can't meet demand.
Wow.
And so it's apparently only is affecting, it says here, I think it's only affecting the UK at the moment. The rationing of the liquid gold is only happening in Britain. It's being rationed. The rationing is only happening in Britain and should not last, as Diageo has been pumping money into its St. James Gate brewery in Dublin and is also building a new $20 million brewery in County Kildare.
Great.
So I know a few people, I've been speaking to a few people over here that are involved in buying alcohol for their pubs.
Yeah.
And they've reached out and said, can we get 6 I know somebody told me on Thursday night that they'd asked for their venue, can I get 6 kegs of Guinness?
Mm-hmm.
And the distributor said, you can have 1.
Wow.
So they wanted 6 and they were told they could have 1.
That's amazing. I mean, it's such
and this is the biggest time of the year because it's silly season. So everybody over here is trying to just get wrecked on Guinness.
Yeah.
And they can't get enough.
Wow.
Out there. To the Irish, to the violent Irish drunks. They can't get that sweet liquid black. What do you mean I can't have a fucking? What do you mean you're out to fucking Guinness?
Yeah.
What do you mean you're out to fucking Guinness?
Plain.
Are you fucking? Are you fuck? I want to. I can't even have a fucking 1 pint of plain. I want fucking. You'll fucking give me 12 pints of plain. This is what you're gonna fucking do. That's what you're gonna fucking do.
That's right. They'll start just giving people pints and putting black food colouring in there to try and convince them.
and whipped cream.
Exactly.
This is going to be a pint. It's just going to be like a shitty pint of like Stella, and they'll just put black food colouring and whipped cream on top.
Bovril stirred into it. And people will go, are you fucking taking the piss? That's funny. I mean, it's a sort of Jägermeister story, isn't it? Where something that is sort of a time-honoured, somewhat daggy beverage just gets a glow up, and
totally
due to some clever marketing, now everyone wants it. Because I think of it as the opposite of a fad drink. Yeah, it's an old man drink.
No, it used to be like I think also the article was mentioning that I think that it's got something to do with the popularity of rugby at the moment, or rugby. Or I think maybe that was right. Or maybe they were mentioning that it was just it used to be associated just with rugby and and old Irish men.
I think rugby's
pubs.
having a bit of a moment in America, which
really?
is down in part to the performance of the women's rugby team at the Paris Olympics.
No way.
And Ilona Maher was on Dancing with the Stars recently and on Sports Illustrated. So maybe she's a Guinness drinker, I don't know. But there you go. I guess that I'm going to have to pick something else now as my favourite drink. Otherwise it will seem like I'm trying to look cool.
I did the same thing as you last couple of days. I'm in London, by the way. I don't think I mentioned that at the start of the show. I'm in London and I have been drinking a lot of Guinness Zero, which I'm absolutely loving. Guinness Zero,
it's really
the
good.
Non-alcoholic Guinness. It's one of the greatest non-alcoholic beverages that I've ever had. I came over here because I was supporting drum and bass royalty DJs Fabio and Groove Rider, who played at the Walthamstow Trades Hall on Thursday night. And I played just before Fabio, and I shook his hand and I said, "Hey mate, how you doing?" He said, "Good mate, how you doing?" And then I had a very awkward moment where I went to shake Groove Rider. Groove Rider's hand. And there was that classic thing where he went to do the fist bump and I went to do the handshake. Classic. And then we kind of did this awkward middle hand shake. So I was kind of like doing this, like with Groove Rider.
Yeah.
I said, I did this and
rock,
I did
paper,
this.
scissors handshake.
I did the rock, paper, scissors. I went like this and I went, really nice to meet you. I really like how you drum and bass.
Yeah.
And he just shook his head and walked off.
Please stop rubbing my knuckles. That's great. Oh no. Well, at least you didn't go in for a hug and he didn't want a hug. That would have been
mate.
worse.
Yeah.
I did that.
And now that's. Oh, you went to hug them and they didn't want to hug you?
Yeah, it was my dad, and he said to get away from me.
He went gay, coughing into his face.
That's right.
Well, I want to say I'm going to give you a big hug through the screen. Hug John.
Thanks.
From London to Melbourne, like you always knew we could.
What a great note to end
on. What a great note to end the show. Do you want to say, and you want to do the end and then I'll say the end?
Yeah, sure. This is worse than it was with Groove Rider. Yeah, I feel like I'm I'm the clasping hand over your fist. The thing I want to say, guys, is thank you very much for listening. We must be getting up. I've actually lost the number of this episode off the top of my head, but we must be getting very close now. 2 episodes.
I think it's a good question. I think it's 192 or 193.
Yeah, so I was thinking we're gonna be very close to episode 200. And if you want to mark that milestone by supporting the podcast, the best way to do that is to get on Patreon/DPTM and pick the tier that's best for you and your family.
Awesome. And we can't wait to see you next week.
The podcast.
Blah.